A millionaire bought an abandoned shack to escape his pain, but found a young black woman with twins in her arms. What happened next changed both their lives forever. The key was still trembling in David's hand when he heard muffled crying coming from the back of the abandoned house. For a moment, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. After all, he had bought that dilapidated property precisely to get away from other people. "Anyone there?" His voice echoed off the peeling walls, mingling with the sound of rain dripping through the hole in the roof. The crying stopped abruptly. David moved forward cautiously, lighting the way with his cell phone flashlight. At 45, the founder of the technology company Technova had lost his wife, Rebecca, in an accident 6 months ago. And since then, his millionaire life had seemed like an endless void. The mansion in Silicon Valley had become a mausoleum of painful memories. It was when he rounded a makeshift partition that he saw her, a young black woman, no more than 22, crouched on the floor holding 2 babies who appeared to be only a few months old. Her eyes widened in terror when she saw him. "Please, sir," she whispered, pressing the children to her chest. "Please don't call the police. We have nowhere to go." David lowered his flashlight, trying to process the scene. The girl was clearly malnourished, her clothes inadequate for the Seattle cold, and the babies were crying with a hunger he recognized immediately. It was the same desperation he had felt, but on a completely different scale. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his distance so as not to frighten her further. "Jasmine," she replied hesitantly. "Jasmine Thompson, and these are my children, Kevin and Kyle." "How long have you been here?" 3 weeks, her voice broke. "Since my landlord evicted me. He said he doesn't rent to people like me, with children. The shelter was full and—" She stopped, as if afraid to say too much. David felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of compassion and anger he hadn't felt in months. There was something about the young woman's dignity, the way she protected her children even in such a desperate situation, that reminded him of Rebecca and her work with NGOs. "What about the children's father?" Jasmine's face hardened. "He's no longer in our lives. When he found out they were twins, he said he couldn't afford 2 black kids and disappeared." She paused, a tear running down her dirty cheek. "But that's not all. There are other people involved, important people who made sure I couldn't get help from anywhere." David tilted his head, intrigued. There was something in her tone, the voice of someone who knew dangerous secrets. "What kind of people?" Jasmine looked him straight in the eye for the first time. David saw something he didn't expect. It wasn't just despair, it was pure determination. "The kind of people who have enough money to make inconvenient young black girls disappear. The kind who think they can buy silence." She paused meaningfully. "But some of us know how to keep evidence." A chill ran down David's spine. This went far beyond a simple eviction story. Jasmine wasn't just a victim. She was someone who had been deliberately silenced. As he watched her calm to babies with fierce tenderness, David had no idea that this chance encounter would become the catalyst for a battle that would challenge the entire system of privilege in one of the richest cities in the United States. If you're enjoying this story of resilience and justice, don't forget to stay tuned, because what David was about to discover about Jasmine's secrets would turn his quest for isolation into a silent war against people who believed they were above any consequences. David studied Jasmine's face in the dim flashlight glow. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, there was something else, a sharp intelligence and determination that didn't match the desperate situation she was in. "What kind of evidence?" he asked, sitting on an old box to be at her height. Jasmine hesitated, gently rocking one of the babies who had started crying again. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. No one believes a young black woman against them." "Try me," he said simply. For a few minutes, only the rain filled the silence. Then Jasmine took a deep breath and began to speak. "I was a nurse at Presbyterian Medical Center, the most expensive hospital in Seattle. I'd been working the night shift in the ICU for 3 years, one of the few black women in technical positions. In December, I began to notice something strange. Specific patients, always elderly, always wealthy, were dying in a convenient manner." David frowned. "What do you mean?" "Families fighting over inheritance. Suddenly, the patriarch would have a complication during the night and die. Always when I wasn't on duty, always with the same doctor on call. Dr. Richard Blackwood." The name came out like a curse. 3 cases in 2 weeks, all with wills changed days before their deaths." "And did you report it?" Jasmine let out a bitter laugh. "I tried. First, I told my supervisor, head nurse Margaret Stone. She told me not to cause trouble. Then, I went to the medical director, Dr. Harrison Mills. He said I was imagining things and maybe I should focus on my work instead of creating conspiracy theories. The babies had stopped crying, as if they could sense the tension in their mother's voice. David realized his own hands were clenched into fists. But you didn't give up. I started documenting everything: schedules, procedures, conversations. I discovered that Dr. Blackwood was a partner in an investment company called Pinnacle Holdings, along with lawyers specializing in wills. She paused, eyes shining with restrained anger. They had a system. They identified wealthy elderly people with no close family, convinced them to change their wills, and then they took care of the problem. David felt another chill. Do you have proof of this? I did. Photos of medical records, recordings of conversations, documents from Pinnacle Holdings that a friend in administration gave me. Until one night, I caught Dr. Blackwood injecting something that wasn't prescribed into a patient. I filmed it, and the next day, I was fired. Budget cuts, they said. A week later, my apartment was broken into. They took my computer, my phone, all my documents. And then they found out I was pregnant. David looked at the babies sleeping in her arms, finally understanding. The father was one of the hospital interns. When Dr. Blackwood found out, he called Jonathan, the boy's father, for a private talk. The next day, Jonathan told me he couldn't see me anymore, that he'd been offered a residency in another state, and I should forget he ever existed. 2 weeks later, she was evicted. Every job she applied for since, every clinic, every hospital, they already knew my name before I walked in. David began pacing, his business mind piecing together the horror. They created a blacklist. Worse, a narrative: unstable black nurse, fired for cause, made false accusations, tried to blackmail the hospital. Jasmine hugged the twins tighter. Who's going to believe my word against theirs? You said you still have evidence. Jasmine looked up. A small smile curved her lips. They don't know this, but I've always been paranoid about digital security. Before I even started investigating, I created encrypted backups of everything on 3 different servers. And 2 weeks ago, through an online whistleblower group, I found out I'm not the only one. There are at least 6 nurses in 3 different states with identical stories. David froze. They're doing this on a national scale. Now you understand why I'm hiding in an abandoned shack with my children instead of working in a hospital, Jasmine said softly. They have money, influence, connections. I have the truth and 2 children to feed. David was silent for a moment. Then he asked quietly, Jasmine, do you have any idea who you're talking to? She looked confused. A man who bought an abandoned shack to escape his pain. David took out his phone and showed her his lock screen, a photo of him and Rebecca at a tech conference. My name is David Chun. I'm the founder and CEO of Technova. Net worth $340 million. And I just realized I have the resources to fight a war against people who think they're above the law. Jasmine's eyes widened as she recognized the face. She'd seen him on magazine covers. And do you know what the most interesting thing about being rich in Seattle is? David continued. You find out very quickly who the really powerful people are. And I'm pretty sure Dr. Richard Blackwood isn't even close to being the biggest fish in this story. Why would you help me? She asked quietly. David turned toward the rain-soaked window. Because 6 months ago, I also lost everything that mattered. You were punished for telling the truth. I just lost my wife in an accident. He turned back. And because some wars are worth fighting. For the first time in months, Jasmine felt a flicker of hope. But she also saw something deeper in David's eyes, something personal. What aren't you telling me about your wife? She asked softly. David paused. When he finally spoke, his voice carried buried pain. Rebecca didn't die in an accident. She was investigating irregularities in a healthcare system for her NGO when her car veered off the road on a rainy night. He looked at her, eyes wet. And guess what name was on the list of doctors she was investigating? The silence that followed was only broken by the sound of rain hitting the roof.
They're not just killing people for money. They're doing it to buy specific properties. Jasmine stopped rocking Kyle. What do you mean? Think about it, David said. Wealthy seniors with no family living in valuable properties in downtown Seattle. They die naturally, leave everything to Pinnacle through altered wills, and coincidentally, those properties end up being sold to Vaughn Industries for well below market value. Amanda was typing furiously on her laptop. I'm cross-referencing the victims' addresses with recent real estate transactions. She looked up. David, you just uncovered a gentrification scheme through murder. Marcus stood up, pacing the small space. That explains why they were able to silence Jasmine so efficiently. It's not just a medical financial scheme, it's political. It involves urban development, government contracts, lobbying, and it explains why Rebecca died. David nodded slowly. She was investigating irregularities in the healthcare system, but she probably discovered the real estate connection. To these people, she was an existential threat. Jasmine looked at the sleeping babies, then at David. They know you're investigating. They know where you work. They probably know about me. What's stopping us from simply disappearing, like Rebecca? Amanda smiled coldly. The fact that this time they're dealing with someone who has resources, connections, and absolutely nothing to lose. She looked directly at David. Plus, they made the classic mistake of every arrogant psychopath. Which one? Marcus asked. They completely underestimated who they're messing with. David looked around the shack, at Jasmine protecting her children, at Marcus reviewing legal documents, at Amanda organizing evidence. 2 months ago, he'd been hiding in a mansion, buried in depression. Now he was at the center of an investigation that could bring down a conspiracy of corporate murders. Marcus, he said, how long do we need to build a case that will destroy them publicly? If Kelly gets the records we need and Amanda finds the financial connections, 3 weeks, maybe a month. And how long do they take to solve problems like us? Amanda and Marcus exchanged grim looks. Much less than that, Amanda said quietly. David felt a familiar rush of adrenaline, the same one that had fueled his business success. But this time, he wasn't building a company. He was declaring war on people who thought they were above the law. Then we better work fast, he said, opening a new spreadsheet on his laptop. Because what these people don't know about me is that I didn't build a $300 million company by running away from fights. I won them. As the group organized for the most dangerous phase of their investigation, none of them noticed the small drone hovering silently over the shack, transmitting every word to an elegant room in downtown Seattle, where men in suits calmly discussed the necessary procedures for dealing with unforeseen complications. The Pinnacle Holdings emergency meeting was convened that Monday morning at the Presbyterian Medical Center. Dr. Blackwood, Harrison Mills, and Richard Vaughn were visibly tense when David Chun entered the conference room, accompanied by Jasmine, Marcus, and Amanda. Mr. Chun, what a surprise. I heard you were indisposed recently. On the contrary, David replied, placing a laptop on the table. I've never felt better. In fact, I came here to clear up some misunderstandings about your future. Dr. Blackwood laughed nervously. Misunderstandings? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but you know exactly what we're talking about, Jasmine said, standing up. You know so much that you sent a drone to spy on our meeting 3 days ago. The faces in the room instantly paled. David opened the laptop and turned the screen toward them. We'll start with the recording Jasmine made of Dr. Blackwood administering unprescribed potassium chloride to Harold Peterson, 73, owner of a plot of land valued at $4.2 million in downtown Seattle. The video clearly showed Blackwood injecting something into an unconscious patient at 3 a.m. The doctor tried to stand, but Amanda pushed him back into his chair. That doesn't prove anything, Mills stammered. It could be edited, manipulated. Marcus smiled mischievously. That's why we brought the original financial records that Kelly legally accessed during her work. Direct transfers from Pinnacle Holdings to the personal accounts of 8 doctors, always within 48 hours of sudden deaths. The screen showed detailed spreadsheets. $50,000 to Blackwood after Peterson's death, $75,000 after Margaret Thompson, $60,000 after Robert Silva. You turned murder into a payment system, David said coldly. But best of all, we discovered it wasn't just the elderly who were being eliminated. Vaughn tried to leave the room but found 2 federal agents blocking the door. My wife, Rebecca Chun, was investigating irregularities in the healthcare system when she discovered the connection between suspicious deaths and real estate transfers. You killed her because she was too close to the truth. Amanda projected a news screen. Forensic analysis of Rebecca Chun's car, professionally sabotaged brakes, and the best part? Security cameras at a gas station caught this man. She pointed to a man on the screen tampering with the car 2 hours before the accident. Michael Torres, a mechanic hired by Vaughn Industries on 3 previous occasions, including the accidents of 2 other investigators in Portland and Denver. Blackwood began to sweat. This is ridiculous. You can't prove. Actually, we can, Jasmine interrupted, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. Because in addition to documenting the murders, I got this. The screen showed an audio recording of a Pinnacle Holdings meeting. Vaughn's voice was unmistakable. Journalist Chun is asking too many questions. She needs to be permanently silenced. Use the standard car accident method. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of Mills beginning to cry. 43 people. 43 elderly victims murdered for money. 3 investigators killed, and my wife. Marcus opened a folder. The prosecution already has arrest warrants for all of you, but David wanted to give you a chance to hear a few things first. Amanda plugged a cable into the laptop. Live now, on all social media, the Technova website, and every hospital and police station in Washington state. Vaughn looked desperately at the camera, realizing that thousands were watching his confession in real time. You can't do this, Blackwood shouted, lunging for the laptop. Actually, we can, David said, smiling for the first time in months. You know the difference between you and me? You killed people for greed. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. The comments on the live stream exploded. Arrest them! Murderers! Justice for Rebecca! Mills slumped in his chair. My God, what have we done? My family, my career? Your career ended the moment you decided human lives had a price, Jasmine said firmly. Especially when you decided that young, black women with babies could be silenced without consequences. Amanda displayed the final screen. Frozen bank accounts, confiscated property, revoked medical licenses. Vaughn Industries will be liquidated to pay compensation to the families. All Pinnacle Holdings assets are frozen. The 3 of you will spend the rest of your lives in prison. David closed his laptop and stood. The broadcast will remain online forever. Everyone can see exactly who you are. As agents handcuffed the 3 men, Vaughn looked desperately at David. You don't understand. We're important. We have connections. David stopped at the door and turned. You were important. Now, you're just famous criminals. Outside, hundreds gathered shouting for justice as the 3 were led away in handcuffs. For the first time in months, David and Jasmine felt their lives had meaning again. What neither of them could have imagined was how this public victory would transform not only their own futures, but the entire power structure of Seattle for generations. 2 years later, David and Jasmine were married in a simple ceremony at the same place where they'd first met. The old shack had been transformed into a beautiful headquarters, the Rebecca Chun Foundation for the Protection of Whistleblowers. Kevin and Kyle, now 2 and 3 years old, played in the garden while David worked on his newest project, an anonymous whistleblowing platform that had already exposed 15 criminal networks nationwide. Did you see the news? Jasmine asked, showing her tablet. Dr. Blackwood was found dead in prison. Suicide? David asked. She nodded. Mills got life. Vaughn died of a heart attack during the trial. Justice had been served, though the victory was bittersweet. And Harrison Mills, Jasmine added, he lost his license for good. He's working as a janitor in a commercial building now. Their investigation had led to the most sweeping reform of Seattle's healthcare system in decades. 43 families received millions in compensation. Jasmine had returned to work as a nurse, now a medical ethics supervisor. "You know what impresses me the most?" David said, watching his children play. "They tried to destroy us, but they ended up creating something bigger than any of us could have imagined." Technova was now worth $800 million, built on David's reputation for using technology for justice. Jasmine had become one of the most respected nurses in the state. "Rebecca would be proud," Jasmine whispered, touching her wedding ring. "She would," David said softly. "And she'd know that the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt us. It's building something they could have never imagined." David looked at the small camera discreetly